Before we get started, we'd like to thank our August sponsor, G&M Cattle Co. We appreciate their support of Beefmaster Banter and Beefmaster Breeders United, and we're grateful to have industry partners like G&M Cattle Co. helping us bring these conversations to you. Now let's get into today's podcast. Welcome to the Beefmaster Banter. I am your host, Hannah Nixon, the marketing director here at Beefmaster Breeders United. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Lance Bauer, our EVP. Lance, how's it going over there in Bryan?
It's good. It's been really warm, really humid, and I guess I'm glad I have an office job right now because you get to sit in the AC a little bit, but it is hot and humid. It's August in Texas.
Yeah, even over here in West Texas, it's more humid than it has been. And I can definitely say we're still praying for rain, but it is hot and humid for sure. Tony, are you in Nashville right now?
I am. But otherwise, I'd be in West Texas where it's usually hot and dry, and it's a dry heat. So it's just like a flamethrower as compared to a sauna.
Yes.
I should have introduced you first. So listeners, today on the podcast, we're joined by Tony St. James, a longtime agriculture broadcaster and host of the All Ag Radio Network and market specialist for RFD-TV. Tony, do you want to give us a little background about yourself? We're so excited to have you on today.
Well, thanks for having me on. The fact that I'm sitting here and talking ag is pretty amazing. If you looked back at where I was 44 years ago, and at the time was in a small town. I actually live in a smaller town now than I was in at the time, but Dalhart, Texas, and started in radio back then, and really didn't want to be back in a small town, didn't want to wear ropers or Wranglers, didn't want anything to do with ag. I was headed to Top 40 radio. And along the way, got married and decided, you know what, we want to have a family, and, you know, Dallas doesn't need another radio DJ, but a small town might need a good radio station. And so we ended up settling in Floydada, Texas, and AM/FM station there. By the way, I ended up back in a small town listening to country music and wearing ropers and Wranglers. So everything I said I would never do, I'm doing now. Along the way, we decided we needed farm programming on the air because it's a rural community. And I found a guy to come in and do that who knew what he was doing. But he left. And so in January of 1998, suddenly I had to learn something about ag. And I found out along the way just to ask questions, and actually had an extension professional who said, you know what, if you want a good interview, ask whoever you're talking to, what are 3 questions I can ask? And you'll have a great interview every time. And so even today, I do that, whether I'm on RFD or whether I'm recording interviews with somebody like Dr. Lance, you know, and that's how I've learned. So my knowledge is very, very thin here, but my contact list is pretty deep.
Absolutely. We're excited to hear what your perspective is from everyone you talk to, not just on a regular basis, but in all of your years of experience. And I loved how you said before we started recording that we're putting you on the spot by making you the interviewee rather than the interviewer. So I am really excited to have you on and that you were able to take the time with us. One of the perspectives that I think you can provide, even if it's on the shallow end, like you mentioned, was, you know, you talk to people across agriculture every single day. What are you hearing right now that you think cattle producers need to be paying more attention to?
Well, I think there's some things that we get focused on, and maybe they're loud conversations, maybe banging in the corner, and it draws our attention. And, you know, I think some of those have been things like reopening a border and, you know, as I kind of step back and look at that, and again, I've got to preface this by saying I don't have a dog in the fight. So my opinions are just based upon observations. The observation I have with the border reopening is we're in jeopardy of losing infrastructure here at home. And I know whenever we talk about Packers, that can get very polarized very quickly. So again, I don't take a stance on good or bad, whatever. Just looking at the infrastructure here, with that border closed, we're watching Mexico move into the driver's seat. And they built their feeding operation down there, and it can mirror what we're doing here. They're buying U.S. corn to feed there. They're processing their animals. They've learned a lot about the U.S. cattle industry and the beef industry in Mexico. So as long as that border stays closed, they're not backing up down there, and suddenly we're going to get 1 million head of cattle coming across the border. We may end up with 1 million head, but they're coming in as primal, subprimal cuts. They're coming in as carcasses to be finished up here. We're just moving that infrastructure, and as we do, the question I have is, what does that do to our domestic industry? What's that do to the cow-calf guy? What's that do to the backgrounder? How does that change the feedlot? How does that change the relationship between the feeder and the packer? What's that do to the small processor? Again, that's one of the things that I think is maybe a game changer when we look down the road 10 years.
Absolutely. Kind of on that line, I kind of liked where you talked about with, how it's impacting different sectors of the industry. And I think, you maybe have a perspective of seeing, different perspectives from the industry without bias. So on that note, you're constantly talking with market folks. What do you think they understand about the cattle market that you think maybe the average producer overlooks?
Well, a lot of times we're watching what's happening in the cash market, and there's been a big disconnect as of late over the past couple of months between the cash trade and the fat cattle or live cattle market. And at one point, we were talking $15 to $18 discount in the front month futures to what was happening in cash. We were seeing cash trade 250, 255, and the futures market front month was trading 240, 238. And as we would ask the analyst, what in the world's going on here? Is it the futures trying to pull the cash down? Is cash that disconnected? What in the world's happened? Well, since that time, we actually saw them kind of come together. That August contract, even though it doesn't expire till, a few more weeks here, we did see them starting to move closer together. They're back apart a little bit right now, but that's been an interesting development as of late. It's almost as if the market is trying to pull that cash price down. Again, is it a manipulative kind of thing? Is it just how markets work? That disconnect, every analyst I talked to said this is just not right. What's happening here doesn't make sense.
Lance, I'll let you weigh in here because I know you'll have a little bit more insight than I will.
Well, so, that's kind of what I'm thinking on a traditional cattle cycle. We see those cattle cycles, and what I've heard and seen is it's not traditional, or it hasn't been. And I guess the question I have is from your interactions across the industry. You know, we sit here as Beefmaster and we talk about the maternal aspects of the Beefmaster and how we can help rebuild the American cow herd. I know we'll never get back to where we were, but where do you see the cow herd in the U.S. going from your conversations?
Great point. You nailed that one on the head. Now, go back to where we were 20 years ago. Yeah, we had a lot more cattle. Go back to the 70s or 80s. I don't think the industry ever wants to go back to where you were in the 70s or 80s, because look at consumer preferences back then. I mean, we have a demand-driven market now because the producers have answered the call of the consumer of what we want. Think about what you want when you pull the steak off the grill. You want that marbled. You want that flavor that you don't get from a select cut here. You want that experience. Producers have answered that. And what's happened along the way? Well, we've culled off the ones who were, the select, the lesser cuts, if you will. So we've tightened up our herd numbers, but our demand has gone through the roof. So will we ever go back? Absolutely not. Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back and have the prices that you had back then? Absolutely not. You can't make that work. So through EPDs and through the breeding, we've got a much better product today. Now, with that and the building of that demand, you've got to figure out some way to continue to meet that demand. Let's use ground beef as an example. We love hamburgers now, but in order to get that, we've got to use something else to bring in that lean aspect. And unless one segment of the industry wants to sit around and figure out a way to make money on lean cull cows, we're going to have to import some stuff. So we've got, I think, as an industry, it's important to not be trying to kill off the demand that you so successfully have built.
I agree.
So, Tony, this is something that I was excited to ask you about, especially considering I think it's hitting a lot of different parts of the U.S. today. And, this is switching gears just a little bit, so I apologize for being on a different level. But what's your take on how AI is impacting the agriculture industry right now?
Okay, so we're talking cattle, and you said AI, and the first thing I thought was the original AI, right?
Love it.
I don't have my gloves on here, so AI, that's another one that's very polarizing because we talk data centers, and I find it so interesting that when we talk data centers, how many people are blowing up social media over data centers, not realizing every post you have is the reason why we need more data centers every time you post. So I find that I find the irony in that. And so many believe it's just for AI. But here's the other thing about AI. I actually use that on a daily basis. I'll give you an example today. The Treasury Department released their debt numbers today. I don't even remember what the whole report is. There's 56 pages of numbers. I'm cross-eyed after page 3. But what are we able to do with AI? We're able to take AI and say, help me with these ag numbers through USDA. And through that, we can now see where USDA, the trends of where that money is moving. How is it moving through? You know, what's going into crop insurance? What's happening with the CCC, the Commodity Credit Corporation? Because right now we're seeing quite a bit of money flowing into producers and landowners that are honestly keeping many afloat right now through these very, very tough times. But we're able to use AI to see how some of that is happening, whereas before, you just had to be a number nerd and be able to break that down, and nobody was doing that. So that's one way that I'm using AI. I don't say, hey, AI, go out and find me stories about beef. That's not what it's for. I think we can use it as a research assistant. Now, I'm telling you how I'm doing it on the media side through news, but what are ways that we could use it maybe in production? Well, I think some of the ways we can do is say, hey, here's the problem I see. So maybe one of the problems, and I'm throwing out some ideas here. I want to find ways to identify pink eye before it's a problem. How can I do that? You can use AI to start digging into that. Now, you can't just say, what's an app? Develop an app for me that identifies pink eye. You're not going to get it. I mean, you're going to get something, but it's not going to work. You have to refine that and take it and build on it and say, no, I want this. How do I do this? I think we'll be able to use AI to the point where we can have tools here with this computer that we have where we can go out into the field and just maybe it's a quick shot of the eye, and we'll be able to take that and find out the health of our herd. That's something we couldn't really do before AI. By the way, I'm not the one who came up with that whole thought. It was 15 years ago. Dr. Lowell Catlett at New Mexico State, who was regarded as a futurist, said someday we'll be able to do that. And he had a flip phone at the time. So it's coming. AI is going to give us the opportunity to look at problems, find unique solutions, but they're not solutions that AI can solve. It will simply use prompts from us to help get to the solution.
Absolutely. It's like you said, it's such a polarizing topic right now. And I think that being part of a more traditional industry, we often hear, a lot of pushback on it. And that's perfectly fine. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. But personally and professionally, I think that if we're not finding new ways to utilize AI in our day-to-day, whether it's production, whether it's media, you're just going to get left in the dust because technology is going to continue to develop. And I remember at my previous role with an ag media company, the topic, when it first started kind of coming about in regular conversation was, is this something we're going to take advantage of? And to me, it seemed like the obvious opportunity, but to some of, the older folks as part of the company, it was a real threat and risk to consider. And so I think it's an interesting topic, especially in our industry and how everyone is kind of perceiving that.
Can I jump in for a moment? Because when you asked me about AI and the fact that we're talking cattle, that was the first, artificial insemination was the first thing I thought about. I just wonder if we went back to the days when artificial insemination was starting, was there some pushback at the time for that technology? Where are we today because of that AI? Can we not use this AI in the same ways? Again, can it be used to better the industry, to better your operation? Just a thought.
And I guess I sit here and think, going back to the original AI, of artificial insemination and the new AI of artificial intelligence. Like you said, what pushback was there then? And I think that we are in, like Hannah said, a very traditional industry that sometimes resists change. Change is hard. It's always hard. But all these little technological advances we're making, I mean, I'll throw out the different ear tag technologies, feed sensing technologies, all of that has really helped a lot in terms of the U.S. beef production in my mind. And I think that the younger generation, as they come on, has been adopting them more readily than the older generation. Is that something that you see as well?
Oh, absolutely. Now, you'll have those, there are going to be those in any industry that you look at it and go, there's somebody who's on the cutting edge. They're over 60, maybe they're over 70, maybe even over 80, and they still find ways to plug in technology. They may not be one of the first adopters, but they are one of those who looks out and says, that's a technology that I think we can make work. I think one thing that's dangerous, and Hannah, you kind of touched on this, is to have the idea that technology is bad, and those who are using technology are destroying our ways of life. I think as an industry, we need to be really careful about looking at what other people do and trying to slice it and cut holes in it and find everything that's wrong with it. I'm a big proponent of thinking that the biggest competitor I have is myself. Stop and think about that for a moment. We like to look at others and go, well, we've got to beat them and we've got to beat them and they're going to beat us. Or why not stop and say, I'm the biggest obstacle keeping us from going to the next level? As a business owner, I ask myself that a lot. Maybe I'm the reason we're not moving forward. Maybe I'm the reason we've got issues here or there. It's not the technology, and it's not what somebody else is doing. It's what either I'm doing or not doing. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we move forward. Are you standing in the way of something better that's on the other side? Make sure that we're not shooting those who are in the choir. We're all singing from the same hymn book here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think an element of humility is so important. I mean, not just from a business owner standpoint, but being part of a team. I think about, how my shortcomings might be impacting what our next goal is at BBU, right, Lance? And so I think I love that. So we talked a lot about a few polarizing topics within ag, but then maybe what's something that is happening in ag right now that maybe isn't getting much attention, but you think will be in the next year?
I'm going out on a limb here and saying that there is renewed interest for what you're doing right now and for your industry. Now I'm talking about the cattle industry right now. I'm talking about all of the segments of it. And thanks to people like Taylor Sheridan. Now you may look at his work and say, well, come on, that's not how it is calving in Wyoming. No, that's not what it's like ranching, around the 4.6s. It's never that green. I mean, we can find holes in it because we understand. I know anytime I see something that's dealing with media, I'm always going, well, that's not accurate. They're not using that in the right way. It's not intended for that. It's intended to help make people appreciate our industry more. So I think people like Taylor Sheridan has opened the door for others to want to see what's happening in our home, in our house, our house of ag. Those are opportunities to have conversations. People want to know more. They want to understand more. They don't care about necessarily the beef on dairy cross. We don't have to get into the debate of, is this good? Is this bad? Are heavier weights good or bad? Are these EPDs good or bad? They just want to know more. And so I think part of what we need to do as an industry is play into that interest that they have and the intrigue that they have. What a great way to have a conversation when we're not trying to put out a fire. And I think that that's one of the exciting things right now about the industry, about the cattle industry, and we can pull it over into ag in so many different ways. The door is wide open. What are you going to do with it?
I think it's really interesting that you hit on when Hannah asked that, I was thinking about Taylor Sheridan and everything with all of those shows. And I guess to put it as romanticized, it's romanticized the cattle industry to where people are wanting to get into it. One thing I saw through school when I was, going to get my PhD and working in grad school is you'd run into a lot of people that in their mind it's not as widespread as it is now, but they'd romanticized agriculture, and then they got into it more and really developed a love and a passion for it. And it was really neat to see. And I appreciate your thoughts on that, and that the door is even wider open now.
Absolutely. And again, I love the word romanticized. Here's, and it's a little bit off topic, but I think it will help us get to where we're going here. Think of Cuba for a moment. And, Cuba offers, I think, a huge opportunity for U.S. ag. But when we think of Cuba, I bet you think of 50s Chevys driving around, and you think of bright colors down there. You just think of, we romanticize about Cuba being stuck, if you will, in the 50s and 60s of what was really good. The problem is that's not what Cuba is at all. There are a lot of challenges there. But the fact is we can take that romanticized view that we have of Cuba and help others as we tell the story. And we can tell about challenges of things like WOTUS, Waters of the U.S. What a disaster that could be for family operations had it not been brought to the forefront. Things like, again, New World screwworm, foot and mouth disease. There are the death tax. How could that devastate our ways of life more so than AI or anything like that? They're dealing with regulation and dealing with laws and rules. That's what could devastate our industry. So if you can have that door open to have conversations to help people understand, now it takes some practice. Because I find myself trying to explain something, I'll go back and listen and say, I got too far in the weeds there. Every opportunity you have to tell the story, and then sit back and say, okay, how could I have done that better? Maybe we can get to a point that we in ag are doing less than a TED Talk, maybe a fifth of a TED Talk. Can we tell stories maybe in 5 minutes or less? So maybe you've got 3 different and I'll use a testimony. If you're ever in church, you may be called on, what's your testimony? Well, your testimony might be, I was a heathen and now I'm not. I've been saved here. Or maybe your testimony is, this devastating thing happened, and here's how I came through it. And maybe another one is, I had the opportunity to do something that I would have never had the opportunity to do otherwise. Your full testimony might be 15 to 20 minutes, but you have parts of that testimony that you can tell based upon who you're having the conversation with. And maybe that's what we need to be doing when we're talking about ag and we're talking about dealing with the public and consumers and lawmakers and regulators. Maybe they don't need this part, but this part can really make an impact.
Tony, you talked about, how we're telling the story of agriculture. And I liked how you talked about, it's more impactful the more concise it gets too. I mean, I feel like I encounter that a lot in my role. In all of your years of experience in ag media, how do you feel like the story of agriculture has changed as far as the way we've told it over time?
Which one of these cows gives us chocolate milk? Which one gives me, I don't even know now, I'm showing my oat milk or whatever. 20 years ago, we would have rolled our eyes, right? But now we realize the only dumb question is the question that's not being asked of us. The fact that somebody took the time to ask a question shows us that they want to know. I think 20 years ago, we approached things of, we need to educate the public about this. Well, now we're to the point, and I think this is to answer your question, how things have changed. You're not going to educate anybody into understanding what it is we're doing or how we're doing it. It's relationships, and it's taking the time to show somebody that you care, that they took the time to ask. And I think that's what we've found in we call it farm media, farm broadcasting, ag media, whatever, is finding ways to help tell that story without it being educational. People don't want to go to school. Good example. I know parlez-vous français. I know habla español. I want to habla español. My wife's fully fluent. I don't want to learn Spanish. I just want to know it. And I think that's how many people are outside of ag. They just want to know, help them to know things. And I think that's how we've changed, at least over the last 20 years that I've seen. It's more than, oh, you don't know anything about us, to, well, let me show you.
I love that. Lance, do you have any more questions?
So I was just kind of going to go off of that. We talk about the relationships with the public, and you brought it up, but, where do you see the relationship with ag and policymakers? Because I think that's something that a lot of times gets overlooked by us in the agriculture sector. Is a lot of what they do affects us, and we need to have good relationships with them as well.
Lance, years ago, I coached baseball, Little League Baseball. And Hannah, I'll throw this in because I coached at a time maybe that your husband was playing Little League Baseball. There was a team. By the way, I was a little better in baseball than in flag football. I had a perfect record in flag football. We didn't win any games at all, but we had a good time. And it got to baseball, and And I wasn't there to coach a team to win it all. My goal was to help them have a good time and learn how the game works. But not everybody played that way. We had one team, and they would consistently play Bush League on us, to the point that I was so frustrated with the way that they played Bush League. It's like, come on, guys, we're not teaching the kids anything here. And that's when I realized that I might not like it, but that's how that game's played. And so I could be mad about it, and I could be upset the fact that they're 10-run ruling us left and right, or I could adapt. Now take that same idea and apply it to what is going on in D.C. I know a farmer who is absolutely against any PACs and doesn't believe that we need lobbyists. Absolutely, I'm with you. But that's not how the game's played. The game's played, think about this. Your representative, and I don't care where you are in the country, your representative spends 60% of their time doing something. I want you to think about that for a moment. I'm going to ask you what you think that is in just a moment. 60% of their time is devoted to doing one thing. Now, back to the point. The game is played through PACs and lobbyists and getting in front. Very rarely is the legislation that comes to the floor written by the lawmaker. It's written by staff, and it's written by lobbyists. And we might say, well, that's a bad deal. But think about it. When it comes to ag, if you don't have somebody there lobbying for you and your industry, you have two choices. You can either go up and do it yourself, or you can let somebody else who doesn't know anything about you and your industry write those rules, those regulations, the legislation. We sit back and wonder, how in the world could they vote on this and approve that? Well, it's because things are driven. That's how the game's played, by lobbyists and by those who work in those offices. And in many instances, we're talking about young staff members. Maybe they grew up on a farm, maybe they didn't. But that's where the legislation's written. So when we talk about the importance of having relationships with members of Congress, the EPA, whoever it is, you got to remember who's there. How can you build a relationship with those people? So 60% of a member of Congress, of a House member, is spent doing what? Hannah, do you know?
I would guess networking.
Networking? Lance, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I was going to say, not really campaigning, but networking, meeting with PACs, meeting with lobbyists, constituents, things of that nature.
Okay. It's 6, and you're both kind of right. 60% of their day is spent raising money. It's raising money for themselves. It's raising money for their party. It's raising money for their, if they're a member of some type of a group, we have caucuses up there, like I don't know if it's the farm caucus or what they've got, but they have different groups that they are members of. And that's what they're raising money. 60% of their day is raising money. You don't have to like it, but that's how the game's played.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the honesty, and I think it's something that gets overlooked by many people, and people don't like it, like you said. But it's good to hear it from somebody else. That's if we want to make these connections there, this is how we have to do it.
And I don't think you can ever discount lobbyists have a vital role in helping to both get the policy that you want and keep the policy that you don't want from happening there. That's what a lobbyist can help do. And there's another side of that. Please be careful when you bash somebody who might be running for Congress because they were a lobbyist. Because at the end of the day, are we not all lobbyists? We're all lobbyists for something. Maybe we're a lobbyist for no lobbies at all. But if you're interested in your business and your industry and you've ever tried to help somebody understand, you've been a lobbyist. Be very careful about just trying to put somebody and say they're a lobbyist, they're bad. Be very careful about doing that. Some of the best people that are helping you right now are actually lobbyists in DC. And I think that's one thing you need to remember. The second thing is no one can take the place of your voice individually. Had an opportunity before they closed the pits in Chicago. We still traded cattle and we traded grains in the pits. And by the way, I went there with the young cattlemen through the NCBA and covered it. And to walk out on the floor of the CME and watch everybody stop and start clapping, USA, USA, because there were farmers, but there were ranchers, and they had their hats on. People noticed. Your voice walking in, walk in, it's okay to wear jeans. I mean, dress up. Let's not wear the ones that, we're out dehorning and, castrating and, not working cattle in them, but be genuine when you go up there and tell them your story. Tell them what works. Tell them what doesn't work. Tell them how you got where you are. Your voice goes further than any lobbyist, but if you can't be there every day, you better have somebody that's there on your behalf.
I think that's a good segue into my final question, Tony. And this is going a lot more, general, I guess is probably a good way to put it. What is your favorite part about your role and the role that you get to serve within the ag industry?
My favorite thing is to make sure that the spotlight isn't on me, because I don't matter. I'm here to help the story be told. I wish that our media could go back to that. There was a time when we existed to tell the story and to give you enough to let you decide, is it good, is it bad, whatever. So my favorite part is asking questions. Notice I've already asked a couple of questions of y'all. That's one of my favorite things to do. I love to meet people. I love to hear their stories. I love to not hear what happened to Sonny Hovatter in Virginia in an accident in the cattle pens. But I do love the fact that I met his daughters at an NCBA convention and just said, he watches every day. Can you say something to him? I learned about Sonny and his family and his operation because I asked some questions. Or, maybe it's learning of somebody else who's doing something in Hawaii that I didn't know about. There's so many, everybody has a story. I want to learn as many of those stories as I can and help bring those stories to other people. And so to help me get to what I enjoy the most, it might put you in a very uncomfortable position, but be willing to open up and have that conversation. I think more of us need to be vulnerable. Not vulnerable in the way of come in and take everything I have, but vulnerable to say, you know what? I might look silly here. I might say something silly. Be vulnerable enough to do that because you have no idea how somebody else is going to pull that and say, you know what? Because of that, I love the cattle industry. Because of that, I love New Mexico or whatever. Be ready to be vulnerable and ready to have that conversation so that when I do meet up with you, you can help me do my favorite part of the job.
Awesome. We appreciate it. And it's been great talking to you again since we did that interview a few years ago, but it's been great to see you again. I don't have any other questions. Do you have anything for us?
I've got one for you. Okay. I want you to look into the crystal ball. Thank you for letting me ask. I want you to look into the crystal ball, knowing where you and the industry and your segment of the industry has been over the last few years. What do you see happening in 5 years? What do you see happening in 10 years? What's a moonshot, if you will? And I'm drawing this out so you can think about it for a moment. But what do you see coming, or what would be the moonshot for your industry?
So I think you hit a little bit on it earlier when you talked about culling off the cows that don't meet consumer demand. I think the thing that we're seeing and the thing that's exciting for me in this position with this breed at Beefmaster is seeing a renewed interest in heterosis. Heterosis is free. Heterosis gets us gains in fertility. Heterosis gets us gains in weight. It does, you can select for carcass as well without adversely affecting it in these breeds. We are seeing some climate change. Temperatures are getting hotter. We're seeing deaths in feed yards. So for our breed, I see some big growth potential because of the heat tolerance, because of the 3-breed composite with the built-in heterosis, research projects going on at the University of Tennessee. There's a lot that Beefmasters can do for the commercial cowman, and I see a lot more acceptance coming in the future for us. And I'm going to say this, and people can get mad, but I can see this for all Bos Indicus influenced breeds, just because of temperatures and what those breeds were developed for when they were originally developed.
Yeah, I'm with Lance, and I would even put it this way to answer your question, Tony, is that from a moonshot, right? Is that how you worded it?
Sure. Yeah, we're trying to get to the moon. So what's it going to take?
I think it goes back to our conversation earlier that we talked about with AI, and I'm not talking about artificial insemination, but and I think from the producer's perspective, the folks that are going to continue to adapt and take on to the new technology are the ones that are going to end up moving forward. And I think that's what's going to drive our industry. And maybe that's my very tiny view of what, livestock production and cattle production is. But I think history repeats itself, and that's what's continued to hold true. Tony, do you have any other questions for us?
Oh, I could ask questions all day long, but I bet we've run out of time.
I think you're right, but we're really so happy that you took the time to be with us and talk about all sorts of different topics, right? I think that was a pretty good indication of, your role, right? You get to talk and listen to so many different people. And so I'm glad that we got to get your perspective on some of those things. And we're just so glad that we were able to have you on today. Do you have anything else to say to our Beefmaster crew?
Just keep doing it. Y'all are knocking it out of the park. In 10, 20 years, there will be courses at universities and other places that will be studying how the beef industry, the cattle industry, has done what it's done. From demand-driven cycles, where you throw out the supply-demand equations and you throw all that out. This has been a demand-driven bull market like nobody has ever seen. And I don't know that we'll ever see it again. And the fact that you're doing anything at all within this industry, you're a part of that. And I think that is so exciting. And really the future is bright, but you can't just go, oh, we've reached the destination. Success is not a destination. It's being able to go to this place and then to this place and then to this place. Think of success like hitting all 50 states. Until you've hit all 50 states, you're not done. And by the way, once you hit all 50, you better go hit the territories. I think there are 5 of those. And then after that, you better hit every other country around the globe. There's always more to do and more to achieve and more gains. So just don't rest here thinking, wow, we've done it. There's so much more. So thank you.
No, thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
And we are so appreciative of your time today.
And finally, thank you to the listeners who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and we're so excited to continue to bring you great content from the Beefmaster breed. Please know that we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search Beefmaster Banter. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.